But we have to start at one place, the Bernabeu. Xabi Alonso is no longer the manager. You can put whatever, he's departed the club. No, he was fired. Alvaro Arbeloa is now in charge. And in their first game, they lose the Copa del Rey to Albacete. But let's start with the big one. Conventional wisdom is that Xabi Alonso is gone because they're second in La Liga. They're 5 points back. They lost the Supercopa final to Barcelona. Conventional wisdom is that Xabi Alonso is a system. This is what Jules and I have been saying all year. I want to hear your take. He's a system coach, and this is a team that in recent years, certainly in the Galactico era, has really only had success with man management coaches who trust the players more and kind of let them do their own thing. I'm thinking of Ancelotti, of Zidane. Rafa Benitez had a nightmare. He would say he's a system coach.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, the coaches that tend to succeed at Real Madrid these days and in recent history have empowered player personality and almost empowered player power and let the likes of Vinicius Junior and Jude Bellingham dictate what happens. Carlo was the master at putting some semblance of a structure in place and then allowing those very talented players to solve the problems on their own, which is exactly how these players are used to being treated and exactly how they want to be treated. They want to be given that autonomy. So Alonso came in with some pretty big ideas. We know that. He wants to press and counter-press. He wants to work from the front and backwards. Clearly, Madrid, at some level, bought into this at the higher levels because they've figured that after last year, they needed to change. Their style of play was looking quite outdated. Alonso was quite an extreme version, I thought, and over the course of the season, feels like he's tapered his ideas back a little bit as he's made concessions. Clearly didn't quite make enough concessions because he's bitten the bullet 6 months in.
I made the point that he kind of tried to thread the needle. Because look, Xabi Alonso is a really bright guy.
Yeah.
He was part of the Galactico era under Jose Mourinho. He gets it. I think he tried to thread the needle between the two. But there were obviously certain obstacles that he couldn't overcome. Although that said, I read a piece in The Athletic where they have one of those analytics and tactics boffins. He made the point that actually he was starting to take screenshots of the screens and shows average positions. And he says he was implementing some things. And actually Real Madrid's XG difference this season is the best in La Liga. It's substantially better than Barcelona's.
Sure. I mean, so I think Alonso tried to install certain things, but it's a big task here, right? You pick it up in the summer, which reportedly he didn't want to do. Didn't want to do the Club World Cup, wanted the fresh slate into pre-season. Don't know how that really works because the Club World Cup took quite a while. They got quite far. So how much of a pre-season would he have got anyway? So I don't really understand that logic. But what I think he managed to do was install the counter press at least, right? So as soon as you lose the ball, press for 6 seconds and try and get it back. I thought there were certain players that did that really well. Mastantuono was really good. Yeah. Tchouaméni was huge in the centre of the midfield, mopping up all those balls. And I watched him score several goals because Tchouaméni had intercepted and then 3 seconds later, the ball was in the net. The problem is it never got much further than that because installing a proper press with proper triggers is really hard. It takes time. It takes a full pre-season at least. And doing it with Vinicius Jr. and co.
I knew the V word was going to come out at some point.
But he's a huge character in this. He is a central part of this whole story.
Regular listeners know how I feel about him, know how Jules feels about it. How is he a big part of this story?
Well, it feels like all of the cracks of the Alonso era started to form when Vinicius Jr. decided to remonstrate with Alonso quite publicly during a Clasico win, which is supposed to be one of the highlights of Madrid's seasons for obvious reasons. And despite the fact that they were 2-1 up and the job seemed done and they just needed, 15 minutes to see out, why not freshen things up? Why not bring on fresh legs to close the ball down and to try and see out the game? I think that's fair logic, and Vinicius decided that wasn't acceptable. And the public remonstrating and challenging of Alonso there on the sideline was then not punished by the club. It was effectively backed by the club. And that put Alonso's position into serious danger. And you mentioned it earlier, right? Like he was the one that was supposed to be able to bridge the two worlds because he was a world-class player and a Madrid Champions League winning player and an up-and-coming top tactician. If he can't do it, who can? Who can do this? And Vinicius, I think, sowed the seeds here. This was the starting point, and it's only really got worse.
I think this feeds into a much broader issue when it comes to Vinicius, is that in a football club, but like in a company as well, right? you need to balance your assets. And here we have a club, and I'm sorry, but this goes back, there has to be accountability. This goes back to Florentino because ultimately the buck stops with him, right? You can go all the way back. Resource allocation. I have a left winger who's exceptional, Vinicius, and I bring in another left winger, Kylian Mbappe, who may be even better. And I keep Vinicius, and I say, you guys sort it out. You guys work it out together. I know this season, obviously, Mbappe has adopted to play more centrally and whatever. And I go to the coach and I say, you figure it out. And it was Carlo Ancelotti last season. You can only do that to some degree. And when you see that it's not working, what do? You decide, oh, and I go back to the Ballon d'Or, which traditionally people in England like, oh, Ballon d'Or, who cares? And like I tell you, I don't care about the Ballon d'Or. Jules cares about the Ballon d'Or a lot. However, it obviously, as Jules points out all the time, it matters a lot to the players.
And Real Madrid.
And in this case, Real Madrid made it seem even more important than the stupid ass award is. How? By saying, oh, no, you've won it. You've definitely won it. And then when they find out, no, he hasn't won it, then everybody at Real Madrid, men's team, women's team, Ancelotti, his dog, who were also nominated and might have won awards. No, we all stay home. We get off the private play. All of a sudden, you have made this guy, Vinicius, feel as if he's Messi, Ronaldo, Maradona, and Jesus Christ all rolled into one. Even if you believe that, that is such an unhealthy, illogical way of managing your talent, especially when, and they knew this at the time, they knew Mbappe was coming. And that to me is kind of like the initial cardinal sin, even before you turn to Xabi Alonso. And I agree with you, Vinicius or Mbappe for that matter, neither of these guys, although Mbappe again has improved in that regard, neither of these people are exactly whirling dervishes off the ball. And so it's harder to press and it's harder for a system coach and whatever else. But you've already empowered Vini in this situation. And I also think he's maybe, and I just want to throw this to you, but anecdotally, I know far too many Real Madrid fans, I would say most of them, don't particularly like Vini. And from the start, they said, if the choice is Vini or Mbappe, I choose Mbappe.
Well, the choice is going to become Vini or Mbappe seemingly quite soon with this contract situation looming and the difficulties that the Vinicius situation is continually creating for Real Madrid. Like it's been humming for a couple of years, and Florentino Perez has done his best to almost avoid the conversation. Well, you're not going to be able to avoid the conversation for much longer when Vinicius comes to the summer and he's got 1 year left, and we've got this continued Saudi Arabia interest.
Is the Saudi Arabia interest real? Like, this is the other thing. Sorry.
It's got to be real. I mean,
it seems to me constantly, all the in-the-know transfer markets experts, every club is like, oh, well, every agent said, oh, well, even like the most kind of marginal players, like, your random Tyrone Mingses. Oh, sorry, just mentioning because you're a Villa fan.
No, but what a drive-by.
I'm not. This isn't real. What I'm about.
I was wondering, it's like, which player is he going to pick?
I'm going to pick a Villa. No. But if I'm Tyrone Mings' agent, and this hasn't happened, it's fictional. Maybe Tyrone Mings is a very bright guy. Maybe he doesn't even have an agent, right? It feels like everybody and their mom is like, oh, look, time to discuss my contract. Well, Al Hilal and Al Ittihad want me. And then in the papers, like, oh, well, or if you're going to transfer a player to another club. Oh, well, sorry, Arsenal. You're going to have to pay 60 million for Eze because Al Ittihad is willing to pay 250 million for him. This kind of nonsense. People in Saudi are not stupid. The people in football, right? They know they've been ripped off. They were ripped off by this first generation of guys who've come in who haven't really moved the needle on it. Now, I'm not saying that Cristiano Ronaldo maybe was worth it, maybe he's not worth it, whatever metrics you choose to use. I think it's pretty obvious Karim Benzema perhaps wasn't worth it. Neymar, don't even get me started.
Yep.
But this idea that there's always the offer from Saudi. He wants to go to Saudi, right?
Well, the point was he didn't want to go to Saudi, to be fair.
Of course not. Why? It means Bruno doesn't want to go to Saudi.
But at this point, he really needs to hope that Saudi interest is real, because we are coming to an explosive head here, I think, even for Real Madrid, having backed him all of this time. And for the last, you're right, it does. It goes straight all the way back to the Ballon d'Or. and making him bigger than the club, bigger than the sport almost in that sense, which is a very dangerous position to be in.
All right, the exit ramp for Vini in this one, and then we got to get back to coaches. But Vini is just such a fascinating story. We can help talk about it. The exit ramp is Brazil and Uncle Carlo win the World Cup. He's the top goal scorer in the World Cup, and then he has an exit ramp. Although, of course, if that happens, knowing Real Madrid as we do, you know that then they'll just give him a gigantic contract and lock themselves into
there's nothing about Real
forever.
Madrid that says to me, why don't we sell the Golden Ball winner of the World Cup? Because I'm pretty sure they buy those, they don't sell them, right?
Exactly. Going back to Arbeloa, and actually, no, let's stick with the player because Vini is part of this. This whole narrative, egos, superstars not wanting Xabi Alonso because he's more of an order guy and blah, blah, blah. There's that great story from Zlatan Ibrahimovic, so it must be true, that when he went to Barcelona, I think the club insisted at the time that everybody drive modest cars, and he thought it was stupid, but the idea was to keep everybody's ego in check, keep everybody down and whatever. So the easy narrative is, you guys are all overpaid egomaniac superstars, and you guys didn't want Xabi Alonso because Xabi Alonso didn't go and like pat you on the head the way Uncle Carlo did. I don't buy that. Jude Bellingham really pushed back very hard on it.
He did.
Maybe am I naive when I think actually these players aren't stupid, and some may be egomaniacs. The vast majority are not. These guys understand who Xabi Alonso is. They understand what he did. They understand, okay, we're playing a different way now. We can succeed within that system, right? When he was at Bayer Leverkusen, it's not like he had a bunch of just drones and rubbish robots executing tasks. He had Florian Wirtz, who's pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. So you can be a skilled player and star within. You can be a superstar and star within a Xabi Alonso system.
Look at Pep Guardiola's Manchester City and Barcelona over the last 15 years. I mean, it's not hard to find a bit of evidence for those players, is it? To say, hey, look what you can achieve with a bit of tactical discipline mixed with your natural talent. So I don't think they're stupid enough to not believe any of that.
So we're not really fully buying this narrative.
I think dressing rooms are really, really complex places. And when you have this many talented players together, and there will be some egos in there, of course there will be, then it becomes a difficult place to navigate. Madrid seems like the most difficult place to navigate in the history of football. If you go in with too hardline a stance too fast, I think you're going to be in trouble if the results start to drop. And I think we can clearly see a correlation here of when it started to derail, which is when the results dropped off, because it was only 2 months ago that Madrid were 5 points clear of Barcelona in La Liga. And then very quickly, after a very rough spell, they were 5 points behind. And it always follows results that these kinds of things really start to play out.
So this is where you made a really good point there. And this is where I struggle, because regular readers will know that I always go on about performance being more than results. Maybe it's because I've been too nerdulously influenced by people, but I believe performance influences is a better indicator of future results than current results, because in an individual game, you have variance and whatever else.
Yeah.
I also believe that a lot of football fans and the Madrid press don't necessarily feel that way.
Yeah.
And so while they've had some games where they were really bad in that run, they also had some games where they were pretty good in that run. And more importantly, before, they would have been 5 points clear, but they weren't playing well. And it was Mbappe papering and Courtois papering over cracks. And so I have to ask, if they had won the Supercopa, would Xabi Alonso still be in charge?
I think the answer is yes.
And that tells you that this is not the reason to sack the guy, because you don't sack or keep a coach based on one game. If he had won this, if you think he's doing a bad job, if you think he's mismanaging the egos, if you're dissatisfied with the results against Talavera and whatever else before Christmas, if the players are unhappy, winning one game doesn't change that, shouldn't change that.
It shouldn't, but you do know the club we're talking about, right? It is the most unique club in football with regard to this.
It is unique. Carlo Ancelotti, I remember him telling me, like, this is the only place in the world where you can be 4-0 up and winning, and your own fans will boo you.
Absolutely.
He's just like, I know, because it's happened to me. I get the pañolada. I'm like, we're 4-0 up. I'm like, what? In terms of...
This entire club doesn't make sense like that. I agree with you that performances are a better indicator, but this club doesn't agree with that, and this president doesn't necessarily agree with that. It's really all about the trophies. And that's why this week is one of the worst weeks in recent history for Real Madrid, because the two trophies that they can genuinely, feasibly win this year they have been knocked out of in the space of 5 days. Like, this is an absolute disaster. They have had to pull the plug on a project that clearly Florentino Perez, from the reporting I've read, wasn't fully on board with to begin with, but thought, okay, let's give it a go. My right-hand man has really, really fought for this guy. And I think based on the last year, maybe we do need to change a little bit tactically. At the first sight of it going wrong, they've pulled the plug. They've removed 6 months of progress. They've tried to pull the plug in time to maybe fix things ahead of the last remaining trophy win. And that's gone too.
Okay, if you want to be super cynical about this and get into hard truth territory with Real Madrid, the Florentino superstar-driven Galactico model that we've had for the last 10, 15 years, and which has yielded success. Yield success because in knockout competitions, and they've done better in the Champions League than anybody else, as we know.
Yep.
What makes the difference is superstars doing something special, goalkeepers doing something special, and they've had arguably the best goalkeeper in the world in the last 10 years.
Just picturing Gareth Bale overhead kicks and Thibaut Courtois magnificent saves on Mohamed Salah as you are speaking there.
A Gareth Bale who does nothing for a whole season and then comes up big and single-handedly wins the Champions League final, right? In the league, your bread and butter, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But then you're competing against a club that is just about insolvent in Barcelona. And you know that no matter how much you stink it up, you'll finish second. And then people will get angry. But look, in the meantime, look, we won a Copa del Rey. And look, Vini's on YouTube. And look, like all these things put together, you're in the sports entertainment business and you're selling that. You're selling that to sponsors. You're selling that to fans. You are legitimately the biggest club in the world. Sorry, Man United fans, but I think deep down, even you agree. And there's nothing bigger than Real Madrid. And the Madridismo and this concept of showbiz, it works for you. Your fans are generally happy when you win Champions League titles. So, and it might also be why Real Madrid, they've won a bunch of league titles, but let's face it, it's inertia. Unless, Barcelona have engaged in more self-harm in the last 10 years. And still won titles, right? Mm-hmm. Atleti, up and down. Who knows what's happening with the transfers? Cholo Simeone. In the end, you're going to win your share of them. So, Florentino, going back to what you said, Florentino might say, what I was doing was working. And maybe it was less stressful, too. Mm. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him a little bit too much credit and showing Florentino too much sympathy.
Well, ultimately, he is going to point to the very recent Champions League trophy haul and be like, the way I decided to do it and the managers I decided to appoint achieved this. Look what happened this season when I bowed to one of my most trusted people and decided to implement a different style. I mean, he probably has enough to point to there and say, I was right. I don't think he is, because you mentioned, the one thing you didn't mention there during your retelling of all of the Champions League glories they've achieved is, and you said it earlier, variance. It's a bit random. Champions League stuff is quite random.
Completely random.
Of course. And then I can point to a number of different things, not to discredit them, and that's not really what I'm trying to do here, but there's a number of points during these runs where I'm like, a bit fortunate, bit lucky, big moments, and a bit of variance. That's not something you can point to and go, this is sustainable success.
If Florentino were here, he would say, sorry, Mr. Tighe, why don't we count the number of seasons that I've been president of this club and we've done things my way, and the number of Champions League titles I've won in those seasons versus the number of Champions League titles that any other freaking club has won, right? Yeah. Versus other presidents, right?
Yep.
And then I'm going to laugh in your face because Florentino's right again. I'm being sarcastic.
And that's why we have to say, and I'm sure we agree, the most important man at Real Madrid is and always will be Florentino Perez. It's not Vinny. It's not Jude. It's definitely not Alonso. It's Florentino.
We have to talk about Arbeloa a little bit. Like you said, we don't quite know what to expect. We're going to naturally assume he's a company man. I thought it was interesting that in this game, maybe he was trying to send a message, and obviously they had a bunch of people who were out and tired and whatever. But like I said, Sestero, Jimenez start. He brings in a couple other kids. Palacios, presumably these are guys he worked with at Real Madrid B, presumably. Mm-hmm. When he was a child, he remembered La Quinta del Buitre and Michel and Butragueño being promoted, and Martin Vasquez promoted into the first team, and Manolo Sanchis, of course, and turning everything around. I don't know, but it sounds like you're sort of playing with fire when you instantly do that, and he got burned. I'm assuming we probably won't see this again because it's just Champions League and La Liga. They do not want to suffer the indignity of finishing third. Villarreal, if they win their game in hand, will be a point back. What do you expect his lineup to be? Is it going to be kind of the same as before, but just with slightly more loosey-goosey tactics?
I mean, I can imagine the conversation was, Alvaro, do you remember how we used to do it under Carlo? Yes. Can you do a bit more of that, please? Yes. You're hired. I really feel like they're just going to peel it back and try to effectively just combust on what they've tried to achieve this season and just go back to what they were. So
and they might win the Champions League, and Barcelona might.
It might be great, but obviously the first look we've had was terrible because this was a terrible game of football from Real Madrid's perspective. It was chaotic, it was nasty, it was a joke really towards the end. The last 8 minutes, so frenetic, and I appreciate that coming off the back of the news and the Supercopa loss, like it's hard. The stadium was right up for it. They could sense something big happening. Fine. All that said, the nature of the goals they conceded, bad. The last one was horrendous.
Andre Lunin, yeah.
And it's terrible from Lunin on two parts because Hefte, the man who scores the goal, he takes one of the worst touches you will see in the next month or so in football, punts the ball 40 yards up the pitch by accident. Lunin should come and sweep that up. That's the first thing that should happen. That chance should never happen. Somehow, Hefte manages to end up getting on the end of the ball, takes a terrible shot that comes off Carvajal, and then curls or lobs the ball around the keeper. I mean, I don't think that's a particularly great finish. I think the keeper has completely lost his bearings. So, to me, it looked like a team unraveling. And that's exactly what this team is. It's unraveling.
That first shot that goes off Carvajal, it seems obvious to me. Like he's absolutely winded. And he's like, oh, maybe I can hit it off his arm and you get a penalty. Carvajal, being a consummate professional, wraps his arms behind his back to avoid that.
It doesn't even hit his midriff, it hits his shin.
Okay. There is a scenario where if you do that, if you settle down in defense, which will happen when the injured guys come back, Carvajal's already back. You've got a presentable back four, Tchouaméni, Camavinga. You wait for Mbappe to do something up front. You're going to be moderately good. In the meantime, they have to look for a manager to lead them next season. And I'm going to throw it out to you. I think secretly he's hoping, well, it worked with Zidane. Why won't it work with Arbeloa?
Okay,
but what do you think right now? What is the profile of the guy that they would bring in next season?
So the number one lesson we learned from this, and I say that acknowledging that we did not learn this from Xabi Alonso. We've learned this over the last 15 years. It's personality management, dressing room management among these players is 1A in what the next Real Madrid manager needs to be. You don't need to find the next genius tactician. You need to find a guy who can corral these guys into some semblance of order and keep a lid on it. So, unfortunately for Real Madrid, that market, I don't know if you've looked at the head coach market recently. I looked at it recently because Man United needed a manager. And I just ended up kind of with my head in my hands because it's pretty dry looking. Yeah. Ever since Jurgen Klopp effectively took himself off the market, I said, I'm pretty happy with this background Red Bull job. Where do you turn? I mean, what happened to the generation of coaches that were supposed to sort of enter this soft point?
Well, Harry Redknapp said he would be willing to manage West Ham for free, maybe willing to manage United for free. That is your...
Yeah, maybe. I genuinely don't know where you go because...
But is it partly also kind of like the issue that we have? So if you're a coach, for you to get noticed and advance through the ranks, assuming you're not a Nepo baby, you have to do something tactically interesting and sophisticated with a lesser team. So then you get on the map and then a bigger team offers you a job, right?
Totally.
But the problem is when you go to the bigger team and you've got certain types of players, then it may not be worth your while. I'm thinking, Exhibit A, Andoni Iraola. I'm not suggesting he's going to be the next Real Madrid manager, nor that he should, right?
Yeah.
But you watch Bournemouth play with those guys running like maniacs into the ground, and it works, and it has a multiplier effect. But then when he gets to Real Madrid, he can't play that way.
Well, the problem for that specific, and I know you're not saying Areola to Madrid. Areola doesn't even work to United for the play style issue, right? Because that's not how a dominant top club plays.
Or Thomas Frank, if you want to choose the man with two first names.
Sure, but that also doesn't scale. So not only does it not scale to Man United, it wouldn't scale to Chelsea, it wouldn't scale to City. So it definitely doesn't scale to Real Madrid, who are the most extreme example of manage these personalities, be successful. Fail to do so, be sacked within 6 months. So where do you turn to? Because Madrid are running out of men who can do this. And that's why they keep turning back to the same old men that used to do it well.
So I think after Carlo wins the World Cup with Vini, he may be available to come back.
Back in.
If not, you've got a guy with half of Carlo Ancelotti's DNA knocking about, his son Davide, right? I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe great stone face Zizou is going to get bored eventually and come back. I don't know. But
Maybe.
You're right. It's such a unique skill. What I would say, and obviously because I'm biased towards Ancelotti, I will bring this back to Ancelotti. This is a guy who was the ultimate system coach early in his career. That's what he learned under Sacchi. That's how he played at Parma. That's what cost him probably success at Parma and at Juventus. And then he became a man manager. He knows all the systems. He can do that.
Mm-hmm.
He can make you run around like a maniac and press. That's what he used to do. Maybe there is a system coach that can make the transition. And maybe they thought Xabi Alonso could make a comparable transition to what Ancelotti did. And maybe he still can. It's just going to be somewhere else. And that raises the point. If you're Arne Slot, I hate to do this, Arne, I love you.
Yeah.
But anywhere else, all of a sudden, we've had, 3 managers sacked in 12 days by big clubs in Amorim, Maresca, and Xabi Alonso. No question, nobody has the cred and the pedigree and that Xabi Alonso does. All of a sudden, he's out there.
Yeah. If you're particularly for Liverpool, right? If you're the Liverpool front office here, you've got to be stroking your beard in contemplation because.
And if you don't, if Manchester United were to call, I know he's got to pass at Liverpool and whatever. Yeah, sure. Would he do well at United?
I think so. Yeah,
I think it would be nailed on. I don't know if he'd
so.
want to do it because of the history, obviously, but
and also it's not the best job in the world anymore. If there's 3 or 4 jobs coming up in the summer, and let's say United is there, fine. Let's say Liverpool might be there. I don't think Pep Guardiola will leave Manchester City this summer coming. I don't think that will happen. I think it's at least a year away. But let's say he did, and they decided they wanted Vincent Kompany, and Bayern Munich suddenly needed a manager. I think they'd go straight to Alonso. And if Alonso was there in 12 months or 18 months, I think that's what they'd do. So United might end up getting ousted from this conversation completely by just, quite frankly, a better offer. But Liverpool need to be across this. This is a potentially golden opportunity. Not necessarily in the next couple of weeks, but over the course of this year.
All right, we've gone long, but guess what? It is Real Madrid we're talking about here.